chit chat.
All right, welcome to today's webinar, and thank you for being here right on time. We will wait a couple of minutes before we get started officially, so please use this time to grab that cup of coffee, run to the bathroom, grab something to eat, whatever you need to do, and we'll get started right around 12:02. All right, my iPhone says it's 12:02, so we're going to go ahead and get started with today's webinar, which asks, are you leaving returns on the table? How smart investors use self-directed IRAs for real estate income. And we are joined today by Mark Abramovich of Always Capital. Um, and I'll turn things over to him momentarily, but want to go through our quick housekeeping. First is our disclosure. This presentation is going to be meant for educational purposes only. Any investment, tax, or financial decisions that you make should be done with the counsel of the appropriate professionals, CPAs, realtors, advisors, and you should do all due diligence. Plan does not provide investment advice, so that is just due to the nature of our industry. Another housekeeping issue, we will have the chat turned off as always, but if you have questions, and we encourage all questions, please don't hesitate. You can use the Q&A function on within Zoom to ask questions through there. Please don't be shy. It's way, way, way better when we have more of a dialogue. I know Mark agrees. He's ready for the questions. He wants it to be a dialogue. So please don't hesitate. No question is too small. So please ask your questions. And then finally, if you have any questions about self-directed IRAs or self-direction in general, please reach out to engage@camoplan.com or give us a call. We'd be happy to answer any of your questions. So without further ado, Mark, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'll stop sharing my screen and let you take the captain's wheel.
Thank you. So share the screen. And add music for anybody that's interested. All right, can you see my can you see my screen?
I can see your screen, and now that you showed the music, you have to give us at least like one or two songs that you're loving right now, or something like that.
Sure, I can do it at the end.
All right.
So, are you leaving returns on the table? And we'll have a conversation about what investing your IRA and making it work in real estate. So, same as Camel Plan, little housekeeping that the presentation is not legal or financial advice. It's for general education purposes only. Consult your appropriately licensed professionals such as CPAs and attorneys, and obviously Camel Plan. That's what we're here for. So, without further ado, when investing in real estate, right? And that's what I focus on. So Always Capital is a lending company, and that's what we do. A little about myself. I've been an investor for 20 years. I've been a lender for about 10. I had a career in engineering for 20 years. So it was, everybody asked me about the switch, but it was really a switch from spreadsheets and analysis and math to spreadsheets and analysis and math. So it wasn't that big a transition, but uh, I've been investing for 20 years. I have a lovely wife who supports me and helps me, and two absolutely amazing kids. And the journey was through a real estate education company who taught us, I want to say, in They were wonderful. It was a life-changing experience, but they taught us enough to be dangerous. But in terms of lending, they definitely missed some of what I should have learned. And so I had to pay for that education out of my pocket on some deals that didn't go as well as they should have. And along the way, I did use my IRA to start investing in real estate as well. And so we'll go through it. So in real estate, really, there's two main paths. There's the short term, you buy a property, you fix it up, and you sell it. And then there's the longer term, you buy it and you hold it as a rental and you cash flow it and you get the depreciation and mortgage pay down out of it. So with a fix and flip, that's a more active participation, right? And so the main thing to look at, or how do you look at the numbers on a fix and flip, is you look at the after repair value and you subtract out renovation costs, transaction costs, the purchase price, and that leaves the profit that you should be earning on the deal. And that's one of the biggest mistakes I've seen investors make, which is the profit part. They forget that they're doing this for profit. An owner occupant has the use of the property, but someone who's going to fix it up and they're doing it as a business, they need to do it for profit. So the so you must have it. And for simple math, you can reverse the place of profit and purchase price. So if you swap out if you put profit where the purchase price is, and that will give you actually the purchase price you should pay after the profit. And renovation costs include things like labor and material. Other, costs for the transaction are the cost of money, the real estate transaction costs, the holding costs. And then when we get down to the profit, there's a bare minimum amount of profit and return on investment that you should be earning. And it should be at least 30,000, in my opinion, $30,000 of profit and at least a 10% ROI. Why both numbers are important is because the dollar amount makes it worth your while. But in certain markets, and I'm going to take extremes here, right? In a market like Miami or in a market like New York City or Los Angeles, a $30,000 profit is nothing. The price of the properties is so much larger that you need to adjust using the return on investment to make sure that it's a profitable deal. At that point, the 30,000 doesn't play. On the other hand, in a smaller market like Clairton, Pennsylvania, or Cleveland, Ohio, $30,000 is actually a much higher return on investment there. So using those two numbers together allows you to adjust for what's correct. So that's looking at a short-term fix and flip deal. Now, if you look at,
Can I
if
ask you
you
a quick
then,
question, Mark?
of
Um,
course, Matt.
so, especially as you kind of fix and flips are always kind of not, they have people have to be careful when using their IRA
Hmm.
specifically, but just
Yep.
in general, what's the timeline that you are applying in a fix and flip? Like, are you saying that someone should be in and out of the project in 2 years or 18 months? What's kind of that target zone?
So somebody who's so typically it's an up to 12-month project.
Okay.
So you're going to get a loan for 6 to 12 months, or the project will take 6 to 12 months. Realistically, from what we're seeing, the number is hovering at around 8 months is the typical duration of a flip. And that accounts for the time that it takes to start the project, get permits, do the renovation, get find a buyer, potentially have them fall out of contract, have to find a second buyer, and then finally closing on the mortgage. So all in all, it roughly takes it's a roughly 8 month period. Now, um, I will say that I'm not advocating, and we'll get a little bit further in the slides. I will have a slide discussing using your IRA for a flip and how it actually gets done. I'm not advocating using your IRA to do flips, but I want everybody to understand on this call and know that flipping is one of the methods of making money in real estate, and we'll get to the application of your IRA in order to fund it. And it's typically, I'll jump a little bit ahead. It's typically not as doing the flip in your IRA, it's being the private lender or debt on it. But yes, you should be prepared that it's going to be a roughly 8 month process. And I'm not a fan of playing games, and there are different thoughts on this. Should you do the loan for 6 months and then have an option to extend? I'm not a fan of it. I typically, when it's my own capital, it's a 12-month loan, and if you get it done sooner, great, pay us off earlier.
And a couple other questions, and this is
Of
just
course.
coming out of a completely like green perspective. What kind
Sure.
of leverage, what kind of leverage would you expect as a new fix and flipper? That's question one.
Hmm.
How much, what percentage of the purchase price should you be doing in terms of improvements? Like obviously a ground
Hmm.
up project as your first deal probably isn't the move. Um, And then the third question is, how did you go about like identifying your subs and your realtors and folks like that? Basically assembling your team to make this a scalable process.
All right. So there's a lot to unpack there. I will tell you that I personally do not focus on flipping as a business model.
Hmm.
So in addition to lending, I'm more on the buy and hold side,
Okay.
or even with my own personal IRA, I lend. So I own properties in my IRA. So the flip side of it, I'm not necessarily the best person to ask.
Okay.
What I will say, in terms of projects, what should be your first project? Obviously, smaller and easier is easier to get some experience under you. That being said, I have friends and clients who started out with ground up constructions and with large scale, heavy duty rehabs, like
Hmm.
complete guts. And it's a massive learning curve, but it does work. Here's the advice I give everybody. When somebody comes to me and they say, Mark, I have no experience in real estate, what can we do? And my answer is, especially for credibility and also just their own personal, self-esteem and boost, is what do you do outside of real estate? Everybody forgets that running a household, being the mom or dad of a household, running the budget, making sure everybody's on schedule, tracking all of it is project management. We all have it day in and day out, but nobody thinks that, at home they're, a project manager and suddenly they forget it when it comes to a rehab project. So first off, I want to say that people that everybody who's listening to this right now, right? Remember that you have experience and expertise even outside of real estate. So you may be a new real estate investor, but you're not necessarily a new project manager or a new investor in general. You've all gotten here somehow. So that's the answer there. Now, what can somebody expect when they're brand new? When somebody's brand new and they're going for a loan, they can expect up to 85% of the purchase price, 100% of renovation, and 70% of ARV, after repair value. They're probably, probably it will be about 85 to 90% of loan to cost. So the purchase price plus renovation cost together, about 85 to 90% of that will be the limit on the loan. And so that's for somebody who's just coming to a lender like myself and, our company to borrow. On the other hand, and we're having a conversation about retirement accounts, if you're an investor and you're looking for a private lender who potentially will lend out of their IRA, then in that case, it becomes whatever you can negotiate. I have friends who have been doing, let me put it this way, somebody with experience who's come to me before, we can have a conversation even about 100% of purchase. But let's say you're a beginner investor, but you have a friend who's got money and you want to borrow it from them for a deal. If that friend knows you well and you know what you're doing because you've had, like I said, project management experience, maybe you've never done a rehab yourself, but you've been a realtor or you've been around real estate all the time and you actually know what you're doing, then potentially that friend can fund everything you need. But the advice I would give is it's always easier to ask where you're bringing some skin to the game as well. It's easier to go to your friend and say, listen, I need 60 grand for this project. I'm going to bring 30, you bring 30. Or I need 60 grand. We've got a piece missing from what the lender's providing. I only have 20. Can you come in with 40? Right? It's a very different conversation than, hey, I've got no money. I've got no credit. How about you fund everything for me and then some? Right? It's a very different conversation. And I always laugh. It's how it sounds is to you when you say it out loud is how it's going to sound to everybody else. So while on the one hand, I would say, look, obviously to build up experience, you want easier projects. And it's not a dollar amount because a more expensive a project in LA is going to cost more than Cleveland, Ohio, for example. That's just the nature of it. Even a simplistic, I want to say lipstick on a pig, kind of touch up the bathrooms, change the kitchen project is still going to be more expensive. I mean, just the base cost of the property in LA is going to be more than it is in, I don't know, I don't want to pick on any states here, right? But in the middle of Kansas kind of thing, right? The base price is just different. And so the amount is different. So I would say just look at the project, not necessarily the dollar amount.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Of course. So, so with fix and flips, right? So when you're looking, and especially here, we're discussing deploying your IRA. This is not a call for you to come borrow from us. This is a call for when you're the money, right? You have the money in your IRA and you're thinking of deploying it on real estate, right? So the first option is a fix and flip. You should know how the numbers on a fix and flip run. And essentially, baseline after repair value to know what you should be lending or if it's a good deal. You subtract the after repair, from the after repair value, you start from the end, you subtract the renovation cost, the transaction costs, you minus out the profit and you get the purchase price, or the other way around. You subtract the purchase price and you're left with the profit, and you make sure that that profit is enough. So that's for a flip. The buy and hold is buying a rental, right? And the fancy term that a lot of people know for it is DSCR, which stands for debt service coverage ratio. And essentially, it's a rental. Nothing, I mean, it's all magic, but it's kind of humdrum. You buy a property, you put a tenant in that property, and every single month the tenant pays rent, and after expenses, some amount of that rent comes out to you as cash flow. That's really the uh, the the magic, the simplicity of a rental. And same thing, you start with the end in mind. So you start with the rent coming in, you subtract out the expenses, the reserves and mortgage, and that tells you what's left as cash flow. And it's funny, I remember years ago, my wife and I were over at a friend's house, and we were discussing with his parents rentals and owning rentals, and we said, well, we own rentals, and at the end of the month, after all the expenses and mortgage payments, we're left with cash flow that we put in our pocket. They said, what do you mean? They're like, when the mortgage is paid, in 30 years, you're going to have a paid off house, right? We said, yes, we're going to have a paid off house, but also every single month, the tenants pay the rent. And after all of expenses, we actually have money that we put in our pocket. That's cash flow. And it was fascinating to watch them because they couldn't wrap their minds around the fact that there's actual cash flow. So, but that's the main kind of, I want to say, the major reason people invest in real estate, right? In rentals, especially, it's that cash flow. Now, for expenses, you want to obviously, there's a list right there everybody can see. You have property management, property taxes, insurance, the mortgage payment, vacancy. So remember, people will move. Life happens to everybody, whether they're a tenant that just doesn't pay and you have to evict them. So now you have vacancy, right? And vacancy comes in two flavors: economic and physical. And I would argue that economic is even worse. So physical vacancy, the apartment's empty. Economic vacancy is the apartment's occupied, but they're not paying. And I would argue that the economic vacancy is worse because at least with a vacant apartment, you could find a new tenant. With a an economic vacancy, you can't rent it out, and you have to deal with the people who are not paying. So uh, and then you should be leaving aside reserves for capital expenses. So there's maintenance that comes up here and there, right? A leak happened, the toilet flusher or the toilet guts need to be replaced. But sooner or later, there will be capital expenses. And those capital expenses will include the roof needs to be replaced. The hot water heater needs to be replaced. The furnace sooner or later will go, right? Everything has a life expectancy. And so sooner or later, it will need to be replaced. And so you should be setting aside those reserves, even if it's not broken right now. And then from the cash flow expense, there's the basically that cash flow is that ratio with the debt service. So with properties, they're not necessarily so rentals are not necessarily as passive as we would like to think because you still need to talk to the property manager. You still need to deal with the insurance agent. You still have to file your taxes. So it's not as passive as people might think, but definitely it's a magical thing. And this I actually own in my own IRA. So I have an IRA and I purchased two properties at this point, also about 10 years ago. And over the years, the properties have appreciated, and it's a Roth IRA. So they've appreciated. And additionally, all that cash flow, they just kept coming right back into my IRA. The benefit, a big benefit is so I lost depreciation. I understand that. But the big benefit also has been that growth that's tax free and also that it's truly passive to me. Essentially, my property manager makes a deposit into my IRA. And so, if they need to do repairs, they just take it out of the rent, and then the remainder just goes into my IRA. And based on, IRA rules, right? I can't touch the money. I can't really do anything. And so this works really, really well because all of that income just goes right into my IRA and it bypasses me. The work that I do have to do is I do have to talk to the property manager occasionally about turnovers and repairs. The work that I have to do is I have to pay the annual tax bill. So every time I get a tax bill from the county, I have to reach out to my custodian and make the payment, and I have to pay for the insurance. But this actually comes out to be a very convenient passive vehicle. Any
There was a
questions
question.
about it?
Yeah,
Hmm.
what does the tax situation look like when you sell an IRA owned property?
Huh. Well, uh, I'm going to tell you the first answer I'm going to give is I haven't sold one, so I don't know yet. I've been holding on. At the same time, it's a Roth IRA, which and I have no debt on it, so there's no unintended business income tax, so there's no UBIT. So I would capital gains. I'm going to defer to Matt on this, but I would imagine I have no capital gains because it's inside of a Roth IRA, which means everything that goes back to it is tax free.
Correct. And that was actually that was what Laura, she's the one who asked the question. She was specifically asking about capital gains. So,
Mm-hmm. That's it.
yes,
Yeah.
the property appreciates. Yes, you lose on the depreciation that you would be able to take advantage to reduce your tax liability if it was done with non-qualified funds or outside of an IRA. But then this is the trade-off. This is exactly what we're talking about. So
Mm-hmm.
when Mark goes to sell this property, all of the appreciation from that property will go, because it's a Roth IRA, will go well, if it was a traditional IRA, it would all go back into the IRA. You wouldn't have to pay the capital gains. But the added bonus is that when Mark goes to take a distribution when he's over 59 and a half, he won't have to pay any tax on the gain that he had in his IRA on any of the assets, including these real estate assets. So, are you good, Mark?
Mm-hmm.
I have
Yes, I am.
one question for you.
Sure.
So you said earlier, anecdotally, you were saying how you were talking to your friend about the properties that you and your wife own, the rental properties. Um, so you own properties outside of an IRA also.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
can you, and I'm assuming you bought those before doing the properties inside your IRA, is that right?
I did them at the same time.
Same time?
I simply didn't have more to buy. So it was just, in my case, it was, I want to buy rentals. Great. We bought rentals. Oh, we have IRA money. What do we do with this IRA money? Hey, we can buy some rentals.
Nice. So
It wasn't,
what's been sort of, because I mean, if you like, if you're a hands-on real estate investor
hmm
and you're used to doing everything and replacing the toilets and all that stuff,
hmm
obviously you can't do that when it's held in your IRA. That doesn't sound
You
like it's
could
you.
for free. It's
That,
terrible. Yeah.
um, but my question for you is, what's been sort of the learning lessons or pluses and minuses of pros and cons, I mean,
hmm
of the investments inside of your IRA versus those outside of it?
So the big lessons were, and actually it's not only about about the IRA question, it's also about just rentals in general. The big lesson for me was having to get into the mindset of an actual investor versus a mom and pop operator. What do I mean? The first rentals that we purchased were close to where we used to live, right? So I used to live in New York, and the first properties that we purchased were in Connecticut. Why? Because in my mind, if something broke, I could go there and fix it. What needed to happen and where the shift in my mindset came was that if I wanted it to be a business, if I wanted so many rentals that I couldn't, that they would be able to sustain my life and everything else. Um, and yes, by the way, Laura, the distributions are also tax free into your IRA. But uh, I needed to change my mindset to say, if I have 1,000 doors, can I manage this? Can I show up and fix 1,000 toilets if I needed to? And once I realized that I could not, and once I realized that I had to have a process and system for handling 1,000 doors, it started trickling back to what I could and couldn't do and how I approached the entire scenario. Once that happened, the IRA properties were actually an 8 hour drive away.
Mm.
Specifically, I own them. The properties that I own, they are in Jacksonville, North Carolina, next to Camp Lejeune. And at that point, I could not drive there and fix anything. I had to approach it as a arm's length, like, what do I do? Who do I deal with? And that's how I bought them. So there's really not much of a difference between the way I own those properties inside of an IRA versus the way I own properties, let's say in Pennsylvania, which I do. And same thing, I can't reach them physically. So the big shift was, and the biggest lesson I would say is you have to rely on the property manager. And so with owning rentals, it is not about the rental, it is about the property manager. We have a group, an education group that we run. So every Wednesday is a call, and it's a group called Capital Investing Done Safely. And last night's call was literally about rentals and managing rentals, buying rentals, doing the numbers on them. And that was the biggest lesson that we were telling everybody. First, find a landlord friendly market for your rentals because there's no discussion about cash flow if the local government, and we're going to say state level, city level, right? Everybody, I don't know how many people listening to this are familiar with, let's say, New York City's laws and Chicago's laws, but they're overlaid onto the state and they are horrendous for the landlord. Okay. I'm not having this is not a political discussion. This is a discussion of you're a landlord. You have to be able to collect your rent and you have to be able to evict people if they're not paying your rent. You need to take back your asset. It's your property. And if somebody's living in it and not paying, you have to be able to do something about it. So the first thing is you want to look at least the laws of the state that you're dealing in, right? Whether it's New York, whether it's Florida, whether it's California, whether it's Kansas, it doesn't matter. Look at the laws. Then from there, you want to look at the property manager. That's the next vital piece. Because a great operator can take a mediocre or even a poorly performing asset and make it magical. And on the other hand, a terrible operator can take your golden tower and bring it down to, just molten lead on the ground. Okay, bit of alchemy there. So the operator is important. So is there really a difference with my IRA? The biggest difference, actually, this is something that you need to be aware of. When you buy a property in your IRA and that's how you're doing it, you cannot make a payment for something and then have your IRA reimburse you. So everything for that property, for example, I'm paying property taxes for my properties. I have to pay it out of my IRA. If I pay it out of my own pocket, I cannot recoup that money. There's no way for me to get paid back because the property is not owned by me. It's owned by the IRA. Okay. So that's something you have to be aware of. And what you should consider is that you need to leave reserves because if something breaks, if a turnover is necessary, there's no dipping into your, well, I mean, there is dipping into your pocket, but you can't get that money back. So you need to have the ability to handle it out of the IRA. Okay.
Very good. And yeah, I think that's a great. Just kind of summarize what you were saying is the arm's length rules and prohibited
Hmm.
transaction rules that are in place with an IRA certainly are different than uh, on assets owned outside of the IRA. But in terms of your real estate ambitions and the desire to scale, just
Hmm.
by just by the circumstances of how many doors you wanted to own, it wasn't going to be practical for you to be, you know, putting up
Yeah.
drywall anyway. So really,
Correct.
the way that your relationship to these properties effectively is the same whether they're or not, which is that they're all being managed by the operator, by the management company.
Correct. Correct.
Beautiful. Um,
I see a question.
yeah.
How do you get a mortgage if you are buying with an IRA? I've heard most lenders won't do this. Not true. We will. What you're going to face is a reduction in leverage. Okay. Because once you're borrowing in an IRA, it's not you borrowing, it's your IRA. And there's no what's called recourse, right? If everybody's familiar with personal guarantees, you cannot have a personal guarantee when the property is owned by the IRA. And so what ends up happening is the leverage, right? How much you're able to borrow gets reduced. So it was actually a fascinating experience for me when I bought my properties because and by the way, this is where UBIT starts playing, right? Unintended business income tax. Because if you borrow a mortgage with your IRA for the properties that are in it, then you're now making money on someone else's money. And so that portion that's earned on, so let's just make it easy math, right? It's $100,000 property, 50,000 comes from your IRA, 50,000 comes from the bank. Then what happens is the you essentially everything that's earned for the year on the 50% of that that's now earned on the bank's money, you're actually paying income tax, which I would argue that it's not a big deal because you've made money on the bank's money, which is great. So now you have to pay taxes on that money. Who cares? You made even more money. It's a great thing. You bought more property, but it's just something to consider. And since UBIT exists, and since we know that it applies to the mortgages, right, we can do this. So you can get a mortgage for properties in your IRA. The caveat, the part that I ran into is when I bought my two properties, I initially bought them for 50,000. So 10 years ago, 50 grand. Right now they're worth about 136, 140,000 each. So it's been good. Plus all the cash flow I've gotten over the years. The caveat then was on a $50,000 property, how much is the mortgage? 25,000? Nobody lends that little.
Mm.
So this is where the crux came in. Now, my properties are worth about 136,000 each. So a mortgage for that, let's just round it up to 140 for easy math. It means the mortgage would be 70,000 on each property. There are lenders for that now. So actually I may end up going out there and actually getting a loan in order to be able to recoup some of the money and use it to either lend out or buy more rentals. So absolutely you can um, get a mortgage.
Uh, Yeah. And then, yeah, what does leverage
Uh,
generally look like
Not
for?
50, anywhere between 50 and 65%. It depends. It depends. I don't have a set answer. In general, I always hate the fact that when somebody asks me about rates, LTVs and stuff, um, I don't have a set answer because it's truly situational. It depends on where the property is, the kind of property, the credit score of the borrower. All of these things affect the loan. And so uh, the answer is, that's why we provide a quote every time someone comes to us for a loan. And so it's difficult to just turn around and be like, well, you know, here's what you can get. And then you find out the person's credit score, the fact that it is an IRA instead of an LLC or their personal property, and things start changing.
Yeah, so Laura, just kind of, and we have this conversation a lot, and Carl, one of our co-owners, has this conversation a lot. In general, just to Mark's point, it's not necessarily about what's the standard going rate for non-recourse loans, which are the kind of loans that your
Hmm.
IRA can get. Um, it's more about like what is the reduction in leverage going to be like? Meaning, how much will you get because it's a non-recourse loan? So, what I mean by
Hmm.
that is rather than it being 50% across the board, if you were able to get a loan, not through your IRA, but if you yourself were able to get a loan at, call it 80% LTV or 75% LTV in your outright yourself, if you're going to do it through your IRA, then that loan, instead of being 75% LTV, maybe it's going to look like 65 or 60%. So there's
Yep.
going to be a reduction. So that's kind of how you can think about it. And then
Hmm.
one more thing, I don't know if you mentioned this, Mark, is that your debt service is going to be a touch higher. And I don't know what you guys do at Always Capital, but generally what
Yep.
I've seen is like there's generally about 25 to 50 basis points more on non-recourse loans.
Yeah, there's it's all in the pricing. I wouldn't necessarily want to, quote numbers
Yeah,
on a call. But absolutely everybody's welcome to reach out to us for a quote and we'll happily provide options, right? It's a complimentary quote. We don't pull credit, we don't charge for it. So if you want to know what you're able to finance for your you know, self-directed IRA property, you're welcome to reach out. And to give you a perspective, yeah, 50 to 65% leverage is what you can expect.
cool. Awesome. Thanks
Mhm.
very much for those
Of
questions,
course.
Laura. Really, really helpful. Really
Mm.
appreciate it.
Thank you. So, um, so we covered, right, investing via a flip, and we talked about investing in real estate specifically via the buy and hold method, right? So you're holding a property, you're letting it appreciate, you're getting the cash flow. And with that, we get to we get to your deployment options, right? How do you actually deploy your money onto these deals? So the two kind of main paths are you can either be the lender on them or you could be a partner. I mean, and obviously we discussed, just buying the property yourself, but a lot of, the two major ones are you can either be the lender, so you are the debt. So when someone wants to flip a property, you're not the one flipping it. It's not your IRA flipping it. It is you are the bank for them. Okay, you're using your IRA to be the bank. And my big kind of here's a cheat for you for everybody on this call who are listening to this is as a lender, here's the three things that you want. You want one analysis of the property. So you want to run the numbers yourself. You don't trust anything that the other person's telling you. You run your own numbers. Listen, due diligence, due diligence, due diligence. Okay. So in the end run, you want to plug in the numbers yourself, right? We covered in the previous slides, right? You want to plug in what is their purchase price? What is their cost of renovation and cost of money? What is the after repair value? And you want to make sure that the numbers work. So you want to do one, your own analysis. Then you should have two insurances for the property. One is property insurance. So that's in case of a tree falling down on it, breaking the roof, making sure that you can get your money back, and title insurance, making sure that the property actually belongs to who it belongs to. It's supposed to be sold, that it's clean title, that there's nobody's going to come, knock on your door afterwards and say, or the borrower's door and say, hey, that was actually my property. It shouldn't have been sold. What's up? I actually had this on a personal house that I was buying, and the sellers were kids or the children of the owner. And it turned out afterwards that the owner was actually in prison, and I'm not sure that he even knew that they were selling it. So, but it came out in title. And then three documents. So at the least, okay, these are bare minimum. This is not a comprehensive list, but just at the bare minimum, you should have a promissory note, which is the contract that says how much you're lending, to whom, how much they're paying you for it, what's the term. Then you have the security document, which is either the mortgage or a deed, depending on the state. That's the actual piece of paper that ties your contract to the property, right? That's what gets recorded with the county. That's what tells everybody that there's a loan on it. And then you still want the personal guarantee from whoever you're lending to. So when you're using your IRA to lend, you still want these three documents from the person. So again, one, two, three. One analysis, two insurances, and then three documents. And by the way, I didn't think to do it here, but for anybody who needs a deal underwriter that if you don't have one or you don't know where to get one, you can go to our website, alwayscapitalllc.com/underwriter. You put in your email and name and phone number, and you can download a free copy that we actually at Always Capital use. And again, you'll see the Excel, and it's basically been it's my own sheet. It's what I started using years ago to buy properties, and then I evolved it over the years as my clients came to me and said, Mark, I need, can you add this? Can we add that? And so that sheet is now what we actually will use to underwrite deals. So when I talk about buying properties in Pennsylvania, I have an underwriter, the exact same, well, it's a little out of date because it was years ago, but it's the exact same underwriter that I just told everybody that you can download. So you can download that. Your second deployment option, way of deploying your cash, is you can be an equity partner. So you can be a partner in the deal. Okay, so for example, the LLC that owns the property or is doing the flip, the IRA is a partner in it, and so the money doesn't come in as debt, it comes in as equity. I would say you still need an analysis. You still want to make sure the numbers look good. The contract is no longer a promissory note, it's now your operating agreement for the LLC, for the company. That's where you're specifying the participation and who gets paid what. And you still want two insurances. You still want title and property insurance on the property. Okay. And it doesn't matter if there's no senior debt. Let's just say your friend comes to you and says, I'll use Matt as an example. So if a friend comes to Matt and says, Matt, can you, lend me money out of your IRA? I need to do this project. And I'll do all the work. You be all the money. Well, Matt's going to say, sure, we can do that. I still want property insurance. I still want title work and title insurance. And in the operating agreement, we're going to specify how my money's coming in, how much I'm providing, and how I'm going to get paid and when the project is over. And of course, Matt's going to download our underwriter and run his own analysis to make sure that his friend has his numbers done correctly.
Absolutely, I will. And I shared it in the chat for everyone
Good.
to
Thank you.
check out.
And so now there's a conversation, um, talking about deploying your money. And by the way, so you can be a lender, you can be an equity partner. You can be a lender on a short-term fix and flip, or an equity partner on a short-term fix and flip, and the um, you can be the equity partner or a lender on a long-term rental purchase. Same thing. You simply park your money, just you're parking it for a longer time. So your friend comes and says, or let's say Matt came to me and said, Mark, I've got this opportunity. I want to buy this, 6-unit building. I've got, let's say I have a first position from Always Capital. This is great, but I still need the down payment money. Can you bring your, can you bring your IRA to do this? And Matt says, sure. I'm going to be able to park my money. This is great. I don't have to keep looking for new projects. Sure. because all the distributions will go right back to that IRA and grow it. What's interesting about moves like that? Now, some of you on this call might be thinking, well, why would I want to park my money in a long-term rental at potentially a lower return than doing, turning flips and getting potentially a higher return? It's an interesting bit of math, and Matt and I we were chatting about this a couple of weeks ago. That the interesting thing is, and I'll use very rough numbers right now, but let's say you're lending out your money from your IRA at 16% for the year. So you're expecting 16%. But realistically, a flip project takes about 8 to 9 months until your money comes back. And after it comes back, you might end up with another 2 to 3 months of looking for the next project until that money goes out. So the money realistically didn't work for 100% of the year. It worked for about 75. It worked for 3/4 of the year. Well, 3/4 of 16% is 12. So the actual interest, the actual earn on the money that you deployed is only 12%, not 16. Same scenario. Let's say Matt came and said, Mark, or somebody came to you and said, I want to borrow long-term money. I'm going to buy a rental. We're going to park your money for the next 5 years. And that money is going to be earning 12%. And you're thinking, well, I could have done, I could be doing 16% per year, but that's not true. You're only making 12 because your money's working 75, 3/4 of the time. But with a rental, you park your money and you don't have to do any work. You don't have to get your money back, provide a payoff, then have to review another project, then have to sign documents again. All this, I mean, I understand. I'm not trying to make it sound like it's hard work, shuffling some paper, but at the same time, it's still work that you have to do. And by parking your money at quote unquote a lower return on a longer term might actually be the same earn and a lot less work. So, any questions here?
No questions, but when we talked about it a couple weeks ago, I liked hearing it. I liked hearing you talk about it again.
That one, I have to tell you, that one was a mind bender for me as well. It was explained to me by one of my business partners in Always Capital, and at the time, he was a client. He wasn't a business partner yet; he was a client, and it was really funny because we were discussing the financing I was providing for flips and the financing that we were discussing for potentially parking money for longer, and that's exactly the bit of math he told me. Funny enough, actually, years ago, he was also a speaker from Camel Plan, but that's a completely separate subject. So
All right.
you guys have some smart people on here.
Absolutely the smartest.
So, yeah, that was a fascinating bit of math. So suddenly my IRA, when I could deploy it, and I have a loan right now, unfortunately, it's going to come back. The borrower wants to refinance and get lower terms, but it was interesting because it's the same bit of math I did for one of the loans for a client of mine. I gave him a 3-year loan where I didn't have to touch it. And for 3 years, every single month, he just made a deposit, and I never had to touch that money. It's a wonderful thing. So if there's no questions about, you know, how to deploy it, here is the easy button. So this is something I wanted to mention. So this is where we get to smaller investments and what can you do. So a flip, let's say a property costs $100,000 and the renovation is going to be 50,000. So the total investment is 150K. For that 150,000, the question becomes, do you have enough in your IRA if you wanted to even be a lender for projects like that? Or if you're talking about buying somebody wants to, bring the down payment for a rental, same thing. Do you have enough money in your IRA to make those investments? Potentially not. Or to buy a rental into your IRA without financing, right? Do you even have enough capital in your IRA to do something like that? If you do not, then what you have as a way of deploying your capital is into a syndication or a private placement. Now, a lot of times people will use fund and syndication interchangeably. So let's kind of break that apart a little. A syndication is, and again, I'm not an attorney, but this is what a syndication attorney taught me once. A syndication is when two or more parties get together for a common purpose. So, as the example he gave, when me and when the pilot, co-pilot, and 200 of their closest friends get onto an airplane, that's a syndication. They're getting together for a common purpose. The difference is a security. The difference with a security is who has control of your money. So a syndication is anytime two or more parties are coming together for a common purpose. A security is when one of those parties is controlling the money of the others or the other party's money. Okay. So that's kind of just to top level mention it. So a security or a private placement or a syndication, it's all interchangeable. It's when you use your money and park it with someone else who controls it. Okay. Which becomes a passive investment because a lot of the time, so syndications everybody's familiar with. Let's say somebody wants to buy a 300 unit a building complex, right? 300 doors, apartments. Typically, there's going to be some amount of financing from a bank, and the down payment portion, at that point, whoever's the operator putting this deal together, the investor, they're going to raise capital from a bunch of other people, right? So rough example, $90 million apartment building in Georgia, right? 330 doors in Georgia. Let's say the bank is providing, half of it. So 90 million, out of 90 million, 45 million is coming from the bank. The remaining 45 million is coming from private people, whether they're using their own like their own cash out of their account, or whether they're using money out of their IRA accounts. So this is something you can invest in, right? So that's a syndication. That's a fund, basically raising capital for it. So there are vehicles like that, or mineral, investing into a gas and oil company in Texas, or let's say a debt fund. So always capital, same thing. We have a debt fund where you can invest money into it, and what we're doing with it is we're lending it out on fix and flip projects. It's a passive investment. There's no control that the investor has, but the benefit is now the risk is diversified. The risk is either diversified across multiple apartments or multiple houses or multiple loans. And typically, this will come with a smaller entry. So if, I was discussing, that buying a rental, or doing a loan for a fix and flip might run 100, 150, $200,000. Some syndications will have a lower limit, such as 25, 50, $100,000. So that is an option for IRA investors to be able to invest, right? You still do the same analysis. You still look at it the same way we were discussing flips and rentals before. You still want to look at the numbers exactly the same way. Make sure that it's a good deal, but it's another vehicle of how to earn money on your investment, especially if it's a smaller amount and you have a smaller entry. Uh, I want to answer Laura's question. I'm just wondering where you are finding properties for under 200,000. Realistically, do these still exist? Yes, they do. Uh, so Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, even outside of New York City, there are plenty of properties out there that are still in the, that are still under $200,000. So yes, you can still find them, but you have to look for the market, essentially.
Correct me if I'm wrong,
Mhm,
and I think I don't know the entire like the composition of Always Capital debt
mhm.
portfolio, but I know
Okay.
your loan sizes that you deploy or that you originate, they are smaller. So I assume they're for smaller projects. Are you lending on these uh, smaller balance properties,
Yes.
or yeah, okay.
Yeah, that was actually a great question, and that's actually the major purpose of our own fund that
Hmm.
we are raised and are continuing to raise. Um, it's actually to fund the properties. So, for example, most lenders don't want properties under $100,000, right? They want to deploy larger loan amounts. They want to deploy on larger prop value assets. That was actually the niche we identified, and we wanted to play in it because there are still markets with those sub properties. It's funny how much of my business has been built on what I actually needed as an investor, right? So the underwriter that you put in the chat for everyone, that was based on my own need for an underwriter, and so I created it. The funny part about our fund and the business model of going after these smaller properties is because I own properties that are under $100,000 each.
Got it.
So I mentioned Clairton, Pennsylvania. So that's specifically where I own some of my real estate. And when I bought those properties, I bought them a couple of years ago. I bought two of them for $62,000 each. And at the time, I had a problem, getting financing because they were too small an amount, even though the rents were just fine. In fact, one of these two properties just rented the other month for 1250. So I bought a property for 62,000 that probably right now is still only worth about 80, maybe 90,000, but it's renting for 1250. Okay. So, yes, the market does exist. Detroit, as Detroit has been revitalizing over these years and little by little, there's still properties that are terrible, but overall it's been picking up. And so there are still properties in Detroit as well that are purchased for 70, $80,000, or even after renovation, you're into it for about 100, and they're renting for about 14, 1,500 a month. So yes, these markets still do exist. Uh,
I'm going to do a quick time check on us.
sure,
We're about at the end. So Laura asked kind of one more general question if you want to speak to that really quick, and if you
sure.
want to wrap us up
So
in the next few minutes.
we'll do. So to answer, so do under 200K properties exist? Yes. The syndications I've looked at require qualified investors that requires me to already own a large amount of real estate, 1 million. It's not actually real estate that they require you to own. They require you to be an accredited investor, which means $1 million net worth, excluding your personal residence. That is a typical requirement. You do have to search for who may be able to deal with it. Yeah, my base answer is you have to look for it. That's not an easy answer, and that's a great question for Matt. If any of their, if anybody that they work with at Camaplan, any of the sponsors have such a fund for you, uh, they require a net worth yeah, yeah. So the net worth is the question. And yeah, it's a question for Camaplan if they have any sponsors. In our case, the fund that I mentioned, Always Capital Fund, we also do require accredited investors. At the same time, if you have a friend or family member who runs what's known as a 506B fund, a Regulation D 506B fund, it's for friends and family. You have to have a pre-existing relationship. But then if you're a sophisticated investor, meaning you know what you're doing, but you don't have the net worth, you can actually participate in that. How to find, and then next question is how to find someone to do renovations in a state you don't reside. So first of all, I wouldn't suggest doing a renovation in a state where you don't live, not unless you have a really close relationship with the person doing the renovation. Like you need boots on the ground and you need to have a really good, reliable conversation because if they drop the ball, or let's say whoever's doing the renovation just says, you know what, I've had it, I'm out, you're stuck with the property and you're nowhere near it to even complete it. So this is a whole other topic. I suggest you come visit Always Capital and reach out to us, and we can have a much deeper conversation on just real estate education and how to approach this topic. We run a group for this, actually, with regular weekly calls to answer these very questions. So, um, to round this out, the benefit of, securities is that you can, invest a smaller amount. The offer, and I'm on here to do, education. So, you know, uh, at the same time, we do have a debt fund, and if anybody's interested, you're welcome to check it out. The link is on the screen. Um, if you're interested in investing in it, the offer that I have here um, is because I have an IRA, I'm well aware of its rules. When if you don't have enough money, right, you can invest. If you straddle the 2 years, you can bring in capital for last year and bring in capital for this year. And so what ends up happening is, I think the limits were what, 7,500 last year, 8,000 this year, which
7,000 last year, 7,500 this year.
there you go. So 14,500 is what somebody would start with if they brought in enough for last year and this year. So what Matt and I discussed is for anybody coming from Camel who wants to invest in our fund, as long as they're accredited, we'll take an investment as low as 13,000.
And what's your
So
normal minimum?
minimum, our normal minimum is still is 25.
Okay.
We we made it easy to try. Um, but for Camel participants and who wants to come to us, we are willing to reduce it to 13,000 so that if you're straddling the years, you can leave some money in your account for fees and expenses that you might have for the IRA account, things like that, and we'll take a low 13,000 investment.
And yeah, just a reminder, everyone, you have just a few days left to make your 2025 contribution. So if you haven't done that, make sure you get that money in.
I scheduled this call perfectly.
Exactly. Awesome. Okay, so we have your contact information
Yep.
there. We're at time. Any parting words? This has been really terrific, first of all. I don't want to rush to that. I really
No,
appreciate
no.
your time, and I think it's good. Just the fact that you took the time to say, what is a syndication and how is it different than a fund? Those get thrown around very, very interchangeably. So I appreciate
Yeah,
the information and the kind of perspective you took in presenting it. So thank you very much. But any kind of closing words that you want to share with the group?
my pleasure. My closing words are my information is on the screen. You're all welcome to come check us out and visit us at Always Capital, or reach out to me personally, and happy to answer questions and be a resource for any real estate investing that you guys are doing and gals, because I know that over the years I've had to learn a lot on my own skin, and if I can save somebody a little bit of that pain, I'm happy to.
Beautiful. Okay, thanks everyone for joining. Mark, thanks very much again. The recording will be sent to you afterwards in case you missed something. You have Mark's contact information right there. He's extraordinarily communicative, so I can't recommend enough that you reach out to him with any questions that you have. And we'll see you next Thursday on the next one. So thanks everyone. Have a great week. Thank you, Mark. Talk to you all later.
Bye.
Bye.